What's going on? So yeah, we're gonna check out this interview on Breaking Points. They interviewed Ted Cruz about the Israel-Hamas war. So let's check it out.
Well, we're joined now by Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, who's also the author of the new book. It's called Unwoke: How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. You can see it up on your screen right now. Senator Cruz, thank you so much for joining us here on Counterpoints.
It's great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
All right, so I want to start with a question that you've probably heard from critics. You were on Bill Maher recently on the left over the course of the last couple of months. The book is called Unwoke, again, as we just mentioned. And I'm curious, for example, when Elon Musk banned From the River to the Sea on Twitter, is that an example, or what do you say to critics who would argue that's an example of conservative wokeness? Do you support banning that from Twitter?
Look, I don't support banning really anything. I believe in free speech, and I think that there's a real difference. It's one of the things I talk about in the book between the left and the right. The approach of the radical left, the approach of the cultural Marxists, is to use power and force and coercion to silence voices they disagree with. And by and large, conservatives, we're not looking to silence the left. I don't want to see Bernie Sanders or AOC silenced. Frankly, I want to have people hear what they say more because it's so idiotic. Look, I agree with John Stuart Mill. The best cure for bad speech is more speech. And so, but at the same time, we need to understand the reason I wrote this book is what has happened in America. Look, millions of Americans across this country are looking at the state of the nation going, what the heck happened to the country we love? And what has happened is every major institution in America has been captured by the radical left. And what this book does is it explains that. And each chapter in the book focuses on a different institution. So it starts off with universities. I call universities the Wuhan lab of the woke virus. It's where it was created, it's where it mutated, it's where it spread. From universities, the book goes to K through 12 education, then to journalism, then to government, then to big business, then to big tech, then to entertainment, Hollywood, TV, movies, music, sports, then to science. And the last chapter in the book focuses on China. And I describe China as a central nexus that is intertwined with all of them. And what the book does is really two things. Number one, it explains how and why these major institutions in America got captured by the radical left. But then even more importantly, it lays out a positive, proactive.
I would say I think that's true to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, school is where, especially universities, college institutions, that's where ideas are supposed to be debated. And you're supposed to have two opposite views kind of arguing each other's points where you could kind of maybe come to an agreement to disagree. But I think at universities, we should be allowed to debate whatever we're thinking about, whatever students want to talk about politically, socially, with the identity stuff. So I don't have any issues with that happening at the universities. Do I think they're focused a little bit more on the liberal ideologies? Yeah, sure. But I think you have to have enough voices on the opposite side arguing those things. But I don't have any problem with universities teaching these things and students being able to kind of, argue and debate these points. I don't see an issue with that, but let's keep going.
Active battle plan for how we take these institutions back. Because I think if we don't take the institutions back, we're going to lose our country.
The taking of these institutions back, though, sometimes seems to people like reverse cancel culture. Like my former colleague, Glenn Greenwald, has been has become this kind of big supporter of the rights, free speech kind of advocacy over the last several years. And I'm sure you've seen him recently he's been extremely disappointed with the way that the right has responded to the Israel-Palestine catastrophe. Like he wrote, for instance, conservatives pushing this safety rhetoric, which isn't due to violence but words, should either apologize to the minority groups they mocked all these years or realize they're suddenly endorsing such flamboyant victim narratives because a group they like is claiming it. So why hasn't there been more kind of public support for free speech in the last 6 weeks?
So look, I think free speech is the right approach, and I support free speech for everyone. I support it for radicals. I support it for leftists who hate me. I support free speech for Hamas. Now, I also support killing the terrorists so they can have free speech while they're in the grave. But if you engage in acts of terrorism, I emphatically support Israel's right to defend itself and its stated objective that they're going to eliminate Hamas. But when it comes to the U.S., actually what's happening in universities in particular is a powerful illustration of what I explain in this book. It is cultural Marxism. And you know, I've had lots of conversations in the last 2 months, actually, with just several weeks ago, I was talking with a very successful Silicon Valley entrepreneur who's a man of the left. He's been a Democrat his whole life. And he was expressing complete bewilderment. Where is all of this vicious anti-Semitism on the left coming from? Whether it's in the squad in Congress or whether it's on college campuses. And I explained, I said, look.
Let me just say this. Anti-Semitism can't be grouped with just criticism in general, especially criticism for Israel. I think anti-Semitism was more aimed at criticizing a group of people altogether, which would be all Jews. All Jews do not live in Israel, and all Jews do not think the same way. You have different kinds of Jews. I don't know all the different kinds. I know there's Zionism and there's secular Jews, and so I feel like the anti-Semitism has just become a killer of free speech against Israel only. And it can't be that way. You're going to make people resent you. You're going to make people more skeptical about what it is actually that the Anti-Defamation League and all these things stand for. Is it criticism of Jews in general, no matter what they do? And I think that's where they're kind of going wrong and where a lot of the backlash is. But I don't think criticism of the way Israel is handling the war is anti-Semitism. I don't think saying killing Palestinian children while trying to eradicate Hamas is anti-Semitism. I think that's an inhumane way of thinking. So I don't know. It's just they're taking it too far with the anti-Semitism. And I don't agree with anti-Semitism at all. Like, people hating on Jews just for being Jewish or grouping them all together. It doesn't work that way. It's just like with black people. You can't group them all together. Some black people are dumb. Some black people are smart. Some black people are nice. Some black people are mean. But you can't just say all black people are criminals. All black people do this. All black people do that. It doesn't work that way.
If you look at, and the book on woke explains this, Marxist started out with Karl Marx writing the Communist Manifesto, and he had a worldview that the world is in constant conflict, and it's in constant conflict between oppressors and victims. And Marx viewed things in a socioeconomic lens, and so the oppressors for Marx were the owners of capital, and the victims were the proletariat, the working men and women. And the solution that Marx advocated for was the violent revolution of the proletariat, of the victims, to overthrow the oppressors and use government to forcibly redistribute the wealth. Now, what I describe in the book is how Marxists, starting in the 1960s, began infiltrating the universities and becoming tenured professors, becoming administrators.
Both of them look like they're about to fall asleep.
And from there, we saw Marxism begin to mutate.
They're like, man, what the hell are you talking about, man? Let's get to the meat of this. Let's get to the good stuff.
Then it mutated on other axes. So you had, for example, the same frame of oppressor-victim, but they shifted it to race, and that's where critical race theory came from. Same idea, constant battle, but based on races. They shifted it to gender and sexual orientation and gender identity. That's where things like queer theory came from. And what I explained to this fellow I was talking to is I said, look, what is happening is very simple. For the radical left, they have coded Jews as oppressors. And they have coded Palestinians as victims. And therefore, for cultural Marxists,
not Jews,
they support
Israelis.
the violent revolution of the so-called victims against the so-called oppressors. It is part of what's been indoctrinated. And you look at universities, at these leftists who are radically protesting in support of terrorists who are committing atrocities that are unspeakable.
Not true.
That is a manifestation.
Are there people out there supporting what the terrorists did? Yes. But you're grouping everybody together. Just like you guys do with anti-Semitism. You can't group everybody together. Some people are protesting the killing of innocent people. Is that not okay? So protesting that makes you a Hamas supporter? No, it doesn't make you a Hamas supporter. It makes you a supporter of innocent human life. Stop grouping it all together.
Of the sickness that has taken over our institutions.
Well, do you distinguish between opposition to Zionism and anti-Semitism, or do you believe that those are the same thing?
I think anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.
What do you say to so many different Jewish groups who say that they are anti-Zionist?
So the ones that are radical leftist organizations that look, there are 50 some odd Muslim nations.
You just call Jews not Jews.
There's one.
If you don't
Jewish
support
nation,
Israel, you're Jewish, you're not Jewish. It makes sense.
The modern state of Israel was formed coming out of World War II, coming out of the wake of the Holocaust. And it was formed on the premise that never again means never again, that we would not allow 6 million Jews to be exterminated by genocidal racist maniacs. I think the Jewish people deserve to have a homeland. That is theirs. Israel was historically a Jewish nation going back thousands of years. I've walked in the city of David. I've walked on the streets where Jesus walked down the streets. And anti-Zionists, look, when you see leftists chanting from the river to the sea, that means from the Jordan River to the sea. It literally means obliterate the modern state of Israel because they hate Israel and they want to eliminate the only Jewish nation in the world.
I bet you this guy's about to say something.
Racist and genocidal. Now, you asked earlier, would I
Israel
ban
has
that
the same
statement?
thing in their
I'd allow people to say it.
Whatever doctrine,
members
charter.
of the squad.
It says the exact same
tweeted out
thing.
from the river to the sea. But the answer,
They have to come back
I'd
with
allow
that.
them to say it, but I wouldn't sit there quietly. I'd point out that you are calling for, once again, the extermination of millions of Jews.
As I'm sure you know, though, in Likkud's platform, it says, from the river to the sea, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. Are they suggesting genocide of all Palestinians?
Of course not.
Exactly. So if they're not, why is the other suggesting genocide?
Because that's what Hamas supports. You know, I started yesterday morning.
What?
But that's just restating it. Like,
but hold on. Let me say, yesterday morning.
You know what you just said? That's the exact same thing. From the river to the sea, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. And the Hamas charter is from the river to the sea, Palestinians will be free. What is the difference? There's no difference. How can one be a call for genocide and the other one is not a call for genocide? That makes no sense, man.
I started the day by watching a 46-minute video.
He's about to change the subject
of the actual atrocities that Hamas.
Here we go. He's changing the subject.
50 senators watched it. As you guys know, I do a podcast every week. It's called Verdict with Ted Cruz. I do it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Today's podcast is all about that video.
This guy's Ryan.
Because
counterpoints for Ryan and Emily.
Right about this time, I sat in a room and I watched 137 people be murdered.
Don't let him slide, Ryan.
Most of the footage was taken from body cams or cell phones that the Hamas terrorists were carrying. and they were gleefully murdering civilians. They were murdering women. They were murdering children. And look,
Let me just say this. Bad. October 7th, bad. Hamas, what you did, that's a terrorist act. That's bad. You kill civilians. Bad. Equally or even more bad than what Hamas did is killing 3 to 4 times more civilians on the other side. It's bad. One bad act doesn't mean that there should be another bad act. It's like, what is that? One war crime doesn't say that you can create war crimes or that you can commit war crimes. That's not how it works. You can't say that killing our innocent civilians is bad, and then you go back and do the exact same thing. Well, what does that make you? That makes you a terrorist too. If you call this a terrorist act, what you're doing is a counter-terrorist act. It's the same thing. You're doing a terrorist act too. So you can't mention one thing and then not mention the other, and that one is ongoing. What was it? 1,200 Israelis were killed. Bad. On the other side, what is it at? Like 15,000 now? Maybe more? Very bad.
Hamas, I got to say, the most disconcerting thing, I turned 53 in December. In 53 years of life on this planet, I've never had a day where I watched 137 people be murdered. That's what I did yesterday. And when you watch people, the most disturbing thing was the joy, the glee from these terrorists. I'll tell you, there was a moment on the video where one of the Hamas terrorists called his parents, and the Israelis intercepted the call.
Mm-hmm. Right. And we've heard of this one, yeah.
And he calls his dad, first of all, and he says, "Dad, I killed 10 of them with my bare hands." And he's like so proud and he's celebrating. 10, I killed 10. And he said, "I want to talk to Mom. Can I talk to Mom?"
Yeah.
And his
That's
mom
terrible.
gets on and he says, "I killed 10
That's terrible.
Jews. I murdered them with my bare hands."
Yeah, that's
and
terrible.
she begins crying with joy.
There's no excuse for that,
twisted
but
hate. Can you imagine
you got to
calling
get to the
your
root
mother
cause,
in
man. These
celebration that
people,
you
they're
just
over there, they're
murdered
brainwashed, man.
10 people and you're proud of it and your mother is proud of you for doing it?
And I know Emily wants to get a question, but I just on this point real briefly, whenever we've had critics of Israel on, we've kind of insisted that they condemn that, because while we disagree with a lot on the show, we also try to find kind of moral common ground. And we can all agree that those types of atrocities need to be fully condemned. And with that in mind, I want to read to you a couple things that we've been hearing from the Israeli government. We've had Defense Minister Gallant, "We will eliminate everything." An IDF spokesperson, "Our focus is on damage, not on precision." Agriculture Minister Avi Dichter, "We are now rolling out the Gaza Nakba. Gaza Nakba 2023. That's how it'll end." Israeli Heritage Minister Amahai Elihu said a nuclear bomb is, quote, "one of the possibilities." Finance
That's
Minister
vile,
Bezalel
man.
Smotrich, "We need sterile zones in the West Bank." Israeli President Isaac Herzog,
I bet you he doesn't say
"It's
that's
an
that's
entire
not
nation
good.
out there that is responsible. This rhetoric about civilians not
He's
aware,
about to
not
dodge
involved,
that
it's
question.
absolutely not
Watch.
true. They could have risen up. They could have fought against that evil regime." Another former Knesset member, "There is one and only solution, which is to completely destroy Gaza before invading it. I mean destruction, like what happened in
Those are all
Dresden
calls
and
for
Hiroshima,
genocide,
without nuclear weapons."
ethnic cleansing,
Would you
whatever you
join
want to
us in
call it.
condemning that as well?
So I condemn nothing that the Israeli government is doing. I stand with the people of
Wow.
Israel. And let me explain. There is
Really?
a qualitative difference. The Israeli government does not target civilians. They target military targets.
What?
The Israeli government
Why are they
has
so
stated,
bad at their targeting then, if they're killing so many
so they're
civilians?
actually not. They are.
So then they are targeting.
No, they're exceptionally good at. So for example, a couple of weeks ago, we had stories all over the world
This dude is
that
crazy.
Israel bombed a hospital in Gaza and killed 500 Palestinians. Now, it turns out that was a blatant lie. It was Hamas propaganda. And if you break down literally every element of the story was a lie. So number one, Israel doesn't target hospitals.
Why have so many hospitals been targeted?
Because they haven't. Because it's false.
Who blew them up?
Hold on. Let's actually look at the facts. So Israel uses precision-guided
Ted
munitions.
Cruz, man.
They don't target hospitals.
That dude is a typical politician,
was the case
dodging
was the
questions.
Hospital. It was not an Israeli missile
They're
that took it
experts
out.
at that,
it was
too.
a
Trust
rocket
me, he
from,
I don't know if he does,
Hamas,
but I'm sure he
Palestinian
gets money
Islamic
from
Jihad. And you got to understand,
from
the
AIPAC.
terrorists in Gaza, they fire thousands of rockets. They have no guidance systems on them. So they literally put rockets. The rockets have some propulsion. They have an explosive. They have typically ball bearings or nails or something designed to kill as many people as possible. And they fire them in the general direction of Israel. But they can't steer them. Once they fire them, and about 20% of them end up hitting Gaza. So it's the terrorists that are actually bombing Gaza. So it was a terrorist missile that hit, but number one, it wasn't from Israel. Number two, it didn't hit the hospital. It hit the parking lot. Number three, 500 people were not killed. All of that was a lie, and yet what happened, and I talk about this in the book.
Is it AIPAC? Yeah. Let me see. Pull that up. Is it AIPAC? No, that's the Pacific. Oh, it is. American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Oh, so I was right. Okay. All right. Yeah, let's close that. Okay. AIPAC. Yeah, that's where they get the money from.
But that's journalism. But look. Yeah. So I can tell you there is no military on the face of the planet, including the U.S. military, that goes to the lengths that the Israeli military does to avoid civilian casualties. So I'll give you.
But the IDF said our focus is on damage, not on precision.
Yes, damage to Hamas, damage to Hamas, to terrorists, and I am all for.
They have said the opposite. They keep saying that what they're doing is what they're intending to do, and here in the United States, we say that's not what they're doing.
That's simply not true. They are targeting.
So what they're saying is not true.
No, my focus is on damage. Good, damage Hamas. I want to utterly eliminate Hamas. And I'll tell you something Israel does, for example. So why are there Palestinian civilian casualties? The reason is because Hamas uses human shields. Hamas wants Palestinians killed. Look, you look at the Hamas headquarters. It's in the basement of a hospital. They put it in the basement of a hospital. Why?
But they didn't find it there.
They put it there because they want Palestinian mothers, children killed. They put missiles in kindergartens. And the reason is, it's part of on my podcast. I did an entire podcast
that's a stupid logic. The human shields argument, the human shields argument, right? So here in the United States, if we had a criminal go into a school and hold the whole school hostage, let's just say 100 to 200 children, would that mean we go ahead and bomb this whole school to get rid of one criminal? No, it doesn't make sense, right? Okay, let's say it wasn't a school. Let's say it's just fully grown adults, right? With kids, you're going to be a little more careful, I believe. Let's say it's a warehouse. No, you know what? A government office building with 30 government officials and one criminal holding them hostage. Should you blow up the entire building to get to that one criminal and then say it wasn't our fault? The criminal was holding the government officials as human shields? I don't understand that logic. That makes no sense. And I know it's a war. You have casualties in war. But the ratio from Hamas, the Hamas military members to civilians, it doesn't add up. It looks like you're targeting civilians. That's what it looks like to anybody that can think for themselves.
Was entitled, CNN is Hamas's Air Force. So is MSNBC, so is ABC. And I went through about a dozen stories where The corporate media just repeated Hamas propaganda. And look, Hamas is not strong enough to defeat Israel, but they're counting on the useful idiots in the media amplifying their messages. So I'll tell you something that the IDF does. So, for example, if there's a building that they know they're Hamas terrorists in, they will drop initially what are called dud bombs. They'll drop a bomb on the top.
They've done this in previous wars.
That doesn't have an explosive, and the dud bomb will thud on the roof. And they do it to tell the civilians, get out. Right. They also, by the way, they have every cell phone in Gaza, so they will text civilians, leave. By the way, when Palestinian civilians try to leave, Hamas keeps them there. They want Palestinians to die because it is useful for propaganda. There's no military. By the way, the U.S. military, when we're attacking our enemies, we don't drop dud bombs telling people to evacuate. It's only the IDF that does that.
And so on that note, because we have to wrap, hot conflict now in the Middle East again. Is it time to endorse Donald Trump, negotiator of the Abraham Accords?
Look, I will say, President Trump, we had peace in the Middle East, and Joe Biden inherited peace and prosperity. And he utterly screwed it up. We went from peace and prosperity. We now have two wars. We have the biggest war in Europe since World War II. We have the worst war in the Middle East in over 50 years. And it's because having a weak and ineffective commander-in-chief is a train wreck. It doesn't work. And so, listen, we're wrapping up, but I do want to encourage your viewers. First and only good point he's made is whole interview. The book is designed
I need more money.
Number one, it's interesting and fun. It's filled with stories.
Sorry for cursing, but
some abstract academic work.
Come on, man. Really?
It's an interesting read. I want to encourage folks right now today, pull out your phone, go online, go to Amazon, go to...
Nah, man, we ain't promoting your book, buddy. Get out of here. Promote this dude's book. Anyway, what do you guys think of the video? Comment down below. If I'm off base, let me know. You know, won't hurt my feelings. I'm open to criticism. But something not right about this. The way the government is just supporting what's happening. I don't know. Something seems off to me. It seems like AIPAC has a lot of money in a lot of you guys' pockets, and you can't speak out on what's happening. But, you know, at the end of the day, I got no horse in the race. I'm not Palestinian. I'm not Jewish. I'm not Israeli, and I'm not a Muslim. I'm just looking at this from a point of view who has somebody who's not involved in this situation, and that's the way what it looks like to me. But anyway, let's wrap this video up. I'm out.